Howdy. This is a story about how I transformed an amazing dual sport called the DR650 into a petulant pile of Japanese parts that refused to cooperate for 2 years. So if you're thinking about installing a jet kit on your DR650, you might want to stick around. But y'all, this video isn't all bad, because I'm 101% certain that I've sorted out the carb on this legendary dual sport. But it did cost me dearly in both time and money. So I'm sharing my jet kit journey with you, so you might avoid 2 potential problems that I've found with jet kits for the Bush Pig. And I'm also going to tell you about other associated modifications which, if you avoid, might save you more than $400 in stupid tax. And before proceeding, I want to give a big thank you to all of the DR650 riders around the globe that contribute to forums and to Reddit. You shared your patience and wisdom with me and the world, and without that, my dual sport would still be sitting in my garage, rotting. So 2 years ago, I bought a slightly used DR650 because I had big plans of doing more dual sporting than my KTM 390 could pull off. And the previous owner, he had de-snorkeled it, installed a slip-on, and he decided he wanted to go back into motocross, so he sold it to me. And the fueling on my bike, it was lean. I knew it. And I thought it would be an easy fix, and it should have been. I could have put the OEM exhaust back on it, and he gave it to me, but I didn't have the snorkel, and who the hell wants to go back to OEM exhaust? So I bought a jet kit, and I had no idea that installing this kit was opening a trap door over a pit of vacuum-controlled fueling hell. So what is a jet kit? If you're a carburetor newbie like I was, I'll bring you up to speed. And if you're a wiser geezer than I, feel free to skip ahead to the next chapter or hang around. This is only going to take a sec. Carburetors, they have installable apertures called jets. The BST-40 in the DR650 has 2 that will concern us, a pilot jet and a main jet. And a jet kit for a vacuum-controlled carby usually includes 2 things at a minimum: a selection of main jets that will replace the one installed from the factory, and a custom needle that will also replace the factory needle. Simple. In my opinion, the needle is the tuner's secret sauce. It's often tapered to deliver more gas sooner relative to the position of the slide. Where the factory needles tend to be a straight angle delivering a linear fuel curve, these custom needles are typically tapered to deliver a logarithmic fuel curve. How much net horsepower will you get? It's debatable, but it does make the motorcycle feel more punchy and more responsive. And you can also adjust the height of the needle relative to the slide to help tune it. But that's also possible with many OEM needles, and I'll touch on that a bit later. Now, installing my jet kit didn't take me too long. I spent more time dealing with the junky screws on the carburetor than I did swapping out the bits. Was I finished after that? Oh no. The instructions also told me to cut a giant hole in the top of my airbox and even included a template. So I obliged. And I need to point out the first warning here, and I don't hear a lot of folks talking about this. If you don't like the result of the recommended airbox modifications, you're pretty much SOL. The best way to reverse it is to replace the airbox with a new airbox. And y'all, those ain't cheap. New airboxes are about $450 shipped in the United States. And used ones, they're hard to find too. They're going for like $200 if you could track one down. And that's a big risk to you, but not a risk at all to the folks that sell you the kits and tell you to cut the big hole. They're happy to sell you a TM40 carb that doesn't have the same pitfalls from the Airbox mod if you don't like the result of that Airbox mod with the BST-40. So for a certain vendor, it's a very profitable fail-forward strategy. Now, I'm not saying that's what's going on here, but I sure would feel a lot better if they sold a third-party airbox that didn't cost $400 or $500. Post-install, my DR650 had more power, but it didn't feel right. Initially, it surged because it was lean when it was on the main jet, and then it stumbled because it was too rich when it was on the main jet. And then it felt like you could feel a switchover between the 2 jet circuits. It was total whack-a-mole. And I tried so many things to get the feeling of this bike right, but I never could arrive at a combination of jet sizes and needle height that would produce a smooth throttle response throughout the throttle range. Now, I suspected 2 things were at play here: the airbox modification and the aggressive curve of that needle. Now let's talk about the airbox first. The DR650 airbox is engineered for the BST-40, which is vacuum operated. And that is to say, the amount of flow through the carb causes a vacuum that raises the slide, which is attached to the needle, and that controls the fueling in the middle of the throttle range. And I'm going to throw a link in the description to a video that explains all this very well, better than I ever could. So check it out when you're done with this one. Now, the 648cc cylinder in this bike makes really big pulses of energy when it goes up and down. And the airbox and the snorkel, they serve to smooth those pulses out. But they also restrict the flow of air through the airbox, and that's why the tuners want you to cut it open. So you get to choose a more restrictive airbox that dampens pulses, or a less restrictive airbox that flows more air. Suzuki knew this. That airbox design, y'all, it's not an accident. So before you decide to butcher your airbox, consider the cost I mentioned earlier. Is $200 to $400 a lot of money to you? I suppose you could fabricate a lid of some type to plug the hole that you made, but consider modding the door on the airbox instead. A new door on the airbox is like $30 in the US, and Dino over at Dino's Tinker Shed has an amazing video that explains how he modified his, and I'll also put that link in the description too. Now, I did end up putting my airbox back to stock, and it cost me about 200 bones because I managed to find a nasty used one on eBay and I cleaned it up. Now, putting the airbox back to stock was a huge help, but I still had this two-stage feeling to the throttle that I just couldn't shake. So I replaced the needle in my jet kit with a 6F19 needle. And this might be the best kept secret about the DR650 tuning process in the United States. You see, the 6F19, that's the needle the rest of the world gets with their DR650. The taper looks the same as ours, but the 6F19 is adjustable just like the one in the jet kit. And with that needle swapped out, I still have the 145 jet installed in the carb. There's no specific recommendation that I could find for a DR650 with a factory airbox and a Yoshi slip-on, so I left the 145 in. That's 5 over the 140 the bike comes with. Carby jets are measured in hundredths of a millimeter, so a 145 jet compared to 140 is a difference of 0.05 of a millimeter. But is the 145 too much? Not sure yet. I'll have to find out by checking the spark plug after some serious riding. So I did end up changing one more thing just to make my life a bit easier. I installed an extended fuel screw, and this isn't essential, but it makes adjusting that air-fuel mix of the idle circuit easy peasy. So in summary, here's my current setup one more time. OEM airbox, Yoshi slip-on, 145 main jet, 6F19 needle in the third position, and a fuel screw. How does it run? Let's cut to a video that I made earlier today from my test ride. Now, every time I've tried this since I first got in the carb, I've run into some kind of an issue with surging or bogging or some sort of interruption or hesitation, if you will, between a quarter and say half throttle. So I'm assuming that's when we transition from the idle to the main jet. We'll take it easy as she warms up. That 6F19 needle definitely has a much more docile feel. With the tapered needle that came with the jet kit, it was like the bike just wanted to run, which was kind of fun and very novel. But this feels much more polished and much more OEM. Oh yeah, that's really nice. So right now, no throttle, little decel pop. I would say that's quarter throttle-ish. Mid throttle, full throttle. Zero hesitation, zero transition that I notice. Hard throttle right now. This is where I've really struggled with the tapered needle. I always felt like the bike was doing this. It's not doing anything, it's just running amazing. Wow. We are back to the way it was when I bought it in terms of the throttle linearity and how smooth it is. It's not the most, direct connected feeling throttle. It's not a pumper carb. It's not a TM40, but it's very smooth. Gosh, I wish I had put a 6F19 in here years ago. Well, I've only had the bike 2 years, but I wish I had put that in there initially. We'll just say that. So these adjustments have transformed my DR650 from a bike that I hated back to something I'm really excited to go ride. It doesn't feel nearly as punchy as it did with the tapered needle, that's true, but it runs so smooth. I am playing around with the snorkel to see if it makes a bit of a difference. TBD, and I'll let y'all know. Before I go, I do want to bring up one more thing, and that is, if you mod your carb with a similar jet kit, will you have similar issues? Not necessarily. I think you may not notice the things that I noticed, and other people may simply accept the behavior because they enjoy the novelty of the big punch you get from that tapered needle. But y'all, I'm a bit of a throttle princess, and I know it. I accept it. I really enjoy a smooth factory feel. And the throttle on this bike feels better today than any other bike I have in my garage, and with 5 bikes, that's saying quite a bit. And I would love to hear from you about your experiences with your DR650, and if you've jetted it, share your setup in the comments below. Also, like this video so the algorithm can make your comments and this video easier for others to find. That's it. Until next time, have fun and ride safe.